And we're live. Welcome to the TNR Live Show Travel News Report, where I've got two very special guest hosts today. First of all, if you'd like to participate in our conversation, you can use it on YouTube, the Google Plus Hangout, or you can use the hashtag TNR Live on Twitter, and I will be monitoring that. If you'd like to help support the TNR Live, it'd be fantastic. You can go to the patreonlink.com/letsgoroadtrippin. And if you see me looking around, it's because I'm watching the comments to see who's doing what. First of all, I'd like to say my name is Brad, and I am a tour manager and a tour operator. I've been doing the business for roughly 4 years now, and I've had a bunch of great tours, and I like doing my job. I go anywhere in the world. And I have two wonderful people with me today. I've got Bill Plenefisch and Manuel. Bill, would you like to start and introduce yourself?
Well, I will. My name is Bill Plenefisch. If you watched last week, you saw me for about an hour talking to Brad, and I'm back to hang out again with Brad and, of course, Matt. I have been in the tour business for a couple of years now, so I'm more of a newbie than both Brad and Matt, but I am thoroughly immersed in this business, and I like to add my 2 cents worth whenever possible, so that's why I'm here.
And his 2 cents is worth exactly 2 cents. So, Matt, tell us about you.
Well, thanks for inviting me, first of all, and I also am another one of those folks who's had the chance to be here before, and I have been at this since about 2007 is when I got into this business, and unfortunately that's my home phone ringing in the background, which I can't do anything about. So we'll probably hear my answering machine as well. So anyway, bottom line is that I've been in this business for about 7 years, and I will finish talking about myself after I go kill that phone.
Okay. That's great, Matt. Thanks. Yeah, go ahead and shoot that thing. Real quick, today's show, we're going to be talking mostly about how a professional driver can make or break a tour. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the news, travel news in general. And I know last week you guys heard about the Blue Line crashing at O'Hare, and living in Chicago, that kind of almost affected me because, I ride that Blue Line. That Blue Line is a block and a half away from me, at least one of the stops is, and it goes into O'Hare, and that's how I get to O'Hare all the time. I saw the video, and I was just floored. Oh, just wow. I mean, basically what it was is the Blue Line wanted to go somewhere because they got up on the escalator trying to get into the airport to fly away somewhere. But apparently someone had fallen asleep at the wheel in a very real way, and this is kind of in line with my driver situation. Rumor has it she was overworked, although the union says she wasn't overworked, and blah blah blah. And they also said that the braking system inside of O'Hare didn't work or didn't go off. Well, I read an article where it did actually fire off, sending it into an emergency stop mode, but it didn't stop the train, obviously. The good news is there was only about 32 people hurt, and none of them seriously, which that's extremely good news. But the bad news is there are lawsuits coming in, and about 3 people have already filed lawsuits. The better news is yesterday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, they opened it back up. You can't go up an escalator because they just put in some wooden steps. The down escalator works just fine. So basically, when you're traveling, these things kind of happen. And what do you do in that case? Well, luckily, they were running these shuttles, these buses, back and forth between the only stop that they could go to, Rosemont and O'Hare, and basically everybody was running about an hour behind because of those shuttle buses. That's how much it does affect. But I was hearing good things about how efficient and how fast they could move with those buses. So that's really just kind of all I have is that the update on the O'Hare thing is that, yay, it's back up and running, and they did a pretty good job of getting it up and running pretty quick. Now, Matt, you wanted to talk a little bit about something else in tourism.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that it's up and running again, Brad, because I wondered to myself when that was going to happen, how long that was going to put it out of service. So that's good news that people can still get from center of Chicago out to O'Hare, right?
Yes, and I was very happy to hear that too. I looked it up, so I was happy to hear they were running again.
Well, speaking of airports, one of the things that I picked up from the news this week was that they have named the 10 top airports, the best airports in the world. And Bill, can you tell me what the very best airport in the world is?
I believe I can. So either you tricked me earlier. I guessed that it was Singapore, and he told me I was correct.
He was dead on. Singapore has got the highest rating of any airport in the world, followed by, and this is in order, Incheon, which is Korea, Seoul, Korea's airport. The Munich airport is number 3. Hong Kong is number 4. Amsterdam, and I'm going to be there in about 2 weeks, is number 5. Tokyo, where I was about 4 months ago, is number 6. Beijing, where I've never been. Zurich, Vancouver, and London Heathrow. Not one U.S. airport made it into the top 10.
Not too surprising.
So I have a question on that.
Sure.
I'm sure listeners would also wonder what qualities did they say, what qualities made them number 1 as opposed to not even being listed? Because honestly, I've been to some, I know Brad just made his crack, and there's some airports that I try to stay away from. One is probably pretty nearby to Brad, known as O'Hare. But there are some airports that I don't mind going to. Dulles, for example, to me is not a bad airport at all. It's a little far out to the city, but it's pretty easy to get around and pretty easy to find your way in. So there are some U.S. airports that are decent, and then there's others that I just try to avoid. So what's on the list? How do you determine what makes a good airport?
Ease of access, ease of navigation throughout the airport, the amenities available in the airport, the on-time flight percentage out of that airport. Those kinds of things are what they take into consideration.
Sure.
Now, you had mentioned the one airport that you hadn't been to, or well, several of them, but one of them you said was Beijing. And that airport is just a monster airport. But I'll tell you what, it was very well marked and very easy. You know, for a guy never going to China before, first airport is Beijing. I easily navigated my way right out and through customs and everything. And it was a very, very smooth process, so I can understand why that made it on the list.
So you're saying that there was a lot of English notation and so forth on all the signs and so forth?
Yes, and I followed the general rule, go with the crowd.
And you ended up in the bathroom.
Almost.
Okay.
One of the things I do want to talk about, first of all, we've got a few viewers watching now, and I'd like to say hi, viewers. If you'd like to leave a comment on the video so we can see who you are, kind of tell us who you are and how you found out about the video, it would be fantastic. Keep in mind there's probably about a 1-minute delay between the time we see it and the time you're going to hear a response, because it's about 30 seconds from the time we talk to the time you hear it, and another 30 seconds until we see your video or your comment, and then we can comment on it. So if we're talking and it sounds like we missed your comment, we'll come back to it. If you've watched any of our videos before, you'll notice that I will come back to the comment. Right now we don't have any comments, and I'm going to cry. We've got 4 viewers, and I'd like to see somebody leave us a comment. Tell us where you're from. One of the things I do want to talk about, this has been something that's been in my brain, and I've been talking to Matt and Bill a little bit about it, and I think I've told them the story before, but drivers, when you're on a coach tour, the professional driver, the motor coach driver, is more integral than most people think. They can make or break a tour. Now, I've got a bad story I'm going to tell people it was basically the most nightmarish tour as far as drivers go, next to having a fatality or something horrible like an accident. We didn't have anything like that, but this driver was just not very good. And let me preface this with a couple of things, because the dispatcher, I'm also going to kind of blame the dispatcher on this. So number one, in my 20s, I was a dispatcher. Now, I wasn't a dispatcher for a bus company, and I did this for 2 years, so I understand the strains and the stresses of being a dispatcher. And number two, I have my CDL. I drive motor coaches, or I have driven motor coaches. Now, I do not drive in Chicago, New York, D.C., or any of the big cities. In fact, the biggest city I've ever driven in was Fairbanks, Alaska. So I have a respect for those drivers that have those big motor coaches, the 56 passengers, and they're going around and making it look like it's driving a sports car. I have the utmost respect for that. So I want to make sure people realize I have a lot of respect for drivers and dispatchers. However, in my story comes in, it was a two-bus move is what we call it. So anyway, we had two buses coming into New Jersey, which is standard. They come into New Jersey. There's a student group from Michigan. They drove overnight. They swapped drivers out probably 2 hours before they got to the hotel. We met them in the morning. And my fellow tour manager, Carolyn, she had the second bus. I had the first bus. This was actually a band director I had before. So I had a rapport with her, and she insisted that I be on her bus, which was pretty cool. So anyway, the buses get there about 15 minutes late. No big deal. There was time built in. The kids went in, they changed, they had a little bit of breakfast. And then while they were doing that, Carolyn and I talked to the two drivers. Excuse me. We asked them, had you ever been to New York before? Because that's the first thing as a tour manager you want to know. What kind of experience do they have in the city you're about to go into? No matter if it's Chicago, Detroit, D.C., New York, anywhere. So we asked them, and one of them said, well, about 10 years ago, I drove a car through Manhattan once. And the other guy said, I don't have any experience. I've never been in the city. So immediately, Caroline and I look at each other, and we're a little hesitant, and we're nervous. So that kind of set the tone a little bit. So we told them, okay, the rules of New York. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have maps. Here's some maps. Here's where we're going. Do not rely on your GPS, because once you get in with those big buildings, the GPS is not going to be accurate. It's in every city, and I know you guys are going to be right there with me. And any driver who's driven in New York City, in Chicago, and any big buildings, you know what I mean. So we gave them everything we could, because as tour managers, we can't babysit the drivers. They have to know what they're doing. We depend on them. So anyway, we got on the road, and going from New Jersey into New York City, we were getting on I-80, and I was talking to my person I haven't talked to in a year. It was great talking to Sue. So we were talking and talking, and I look up, and I notice I see a sign that says 80 West. Now, if you've ever looked at a map, you'd understand that west in New Jersey, you're never going to make it into New York City. So I discussed that with the driver, and I looked down his GPS. He had his GPS set to go home into Michigan. That's a problem. So we turned around. We got into New Jersey's Liberty Island, the park there to get over to Liberty Island. Sorry, Liberty Park, going into Liberty Island. And we showed up about an hour and 30 minutes late. And while I was arriving on the ferry, the ferry was just a nightmare. We had about 15 minutes on the Liberty Island itself. And so we got on Liberty Island, and as the ferry's coming into Liberty Island, I'm getting a phone call. So I'm calling, and I'm talking to the dispatcher, and the dispatcher says, well, apparently your driver didn't have all of his logs up to date, so he just got sat down by DOT for 8 hours. How long can you be without a coach? I said, I need one in 6 hours. Because we had a specific thing. We had a lot of walking already to do that day, and 6 hours was fine, but 8 hours was not going to cut it. Anyway, that was the beginning of a 3-day trip that was a nightmare, and a lot more things happened since then with that. And to make an extremely long story short, I was very upset at the dispatcher, number one, because the dispatcher should never have sent 2 green drivers to New York City. You always send one good driver and a trainee, if you want to call it that, and the trainee is always on the second bus. So I know that the company was big enough that they had all the drivers. I know they had other drivers in New York at that time. I don't know if it was a scheduling problem where it just was physically impossible to do what they did. But I was very upset with the dispatcher. I was mostly upset with the drivers, because even though we tried to prepare them as much as possible, at every single turn they screwed up. Both drivers were screwing up left and right. And at the end of the tour, when they got to the hotel to switch out drivers, they were both fired immediately. And it was ridiculous. So that is the worst thing. I mean, we even missed a performance. The our band was performing for some people. We missed a performance, and that's the biggest no-no of any student tour. So yeah, a bad driver can really have a negative effect on a tour, and boy, I feel good about getting that off my chest. And no, I won't mention anybody's names as far as drivers go and companies go, because I'm not that kind of guy. I know that there's drivers out there that are far better. I've been with most of them. Now, Matt and Bill, why don't you talk first? What is something that, I mean, what do you think about this whole situation that they put me into?
Well, I know, as I mentioned earlier, I've only been in the business a couple of years, so I'm still in the learning process. And believe you me, that one of the first questions I ask a driver, and I try to do it before we've even got started, is what kind of experience do you have in DC, New York, Boston, wherever it is I may be going? And if they say, which 9 times out of 10 they say, oh, I've done it, it's a piece of cake, I'm always totally relieved because I'm still learning a lot of these areas too. And frankly, even if I know an area well, it's really nice to tell the driver, oh, I need to be here, pick me up over here, and then they just go. And I can concentrate on doing what my job is, which is to give the students or the adults, whoever the guests are on the bus, the time of their lives, and point things out and get them to where they have to be. So, however, I also realize that, like everybody else, you can be a newbie, and in your situation, I totally agree with you. If the company has 2 buses, they should have one that's experienced, and that's probably a good time for them to put an inexperienced driver in there as well. Hopefully the lead bus knows the one behind him is inexperienced. You don't tell the guests, and the driver needs to not argue. I've seen that before where the drivers get into little fights between each other over where to go and this and that, and that can be frustrating because you want it to be a good experience for everybody. But the main thing is, when I first introduce myself, after I know the experience, I'll say, well, we're a team, we're going to work together, we're going to, and this is the goal. So I have a goal, they have a goal, hopefully the goals are the same, which is to give the people a good trip. And, you know, if we know a weakness that the other one has, we're going to work with it. Nothing's more frustrating than having a driver that doesn't hear that when you're talking to them about it. And they have their own agenda. I'm not sure. I've only had a couple like that. And I haven't had a horror story quite like yours. Most of my drivers have been superb. I've had a couple have been a little questionable, but I managed to still have the tour go off without really a major hitch. But it is a fear I think every tour director out there has, is that they're going to get a driver that just doesn't, either is unwilling to work with them or doesn't know what they're doing. If they're willing to work and they don't know what they're doing, you can work with that.
Exactly. And Matt, in a second, I want you to chime in on what I'm about to say here. On the other side of this, when you have a really good driver, or even if you have a driver you don't get along with, as long as you appear to get along and the driver is still professional with the group and they're still interactive, or they still appear, and even though you guys could be in the back behind the coach, you know, where nobody can see and you're beating each other up, as long as you appear to be working like a team, it really matters. And at the end of the day, I've had it to where, you know, we didn't like each other and it showed, and at the end of the tour, my gratuities showed it. I mean, Matt, what have you seen? I mean, tell us your experiences with good, bad, whatever driver. I mean, that you've seen that, or what experience? I guess what I'm trying to say is, what have you done to make sure that even if you didn't like the driver, did you do to make it look good?
I've been blessed. There have been very few situations in my 7 years out on the road that I've really run into real difficult situations. In fact, most of my drivers, I invited a couple of them to join us tonight. Ray Gallegos, I got to work with last year, works for Dakota Bus Line, and he's sat in on some of your shows before. He is one of these guys who's always 2 steps ahead of me. and I try to do something nice for him, and he's already doing something nice for me. And those are the kind of guys that you want to work with over and over again. But there are times where I've stepped on the bus. I've talked to a guy. We've established that he's got experience and knows the roads that we're going to be on, only to get out on the road and find out that, well, he really didn't know them, but he's afraid to tell me that he didn't know them because it was his first time working on a tour. He'd prior to that time, he had always pulled sports teams and things of that sort. So that came as a bit of a shock. I'm thinking of one example. Last year we went down to New Orleans, and a young man, and he dressed well and made a good impression at first, and had a good personality too. But trying to get him, for instance, as we all know, you wanted the bus to be clean. You want the windows to be clean. Clean windows are important for your guests so they can take pictures out the windows and enjoy the scenery. And not once during this entire tour did he ever clean the windows. It ended up being me out there cleaning the windows. And as much as you want to make your driver, your coach operator, look good, when I finally had to go out and do that, there was no way to hide the fact that I was doing something that he should have been doing. And unfortunately for him, that also reflected in his gratuities. But for the most part, I got to say that when you get in there and you establish the ground rules, you let them know that you want to work as a team, and you start, I always compliment the guy and let people know the things that my coach operator is doing that they don't see behind the scenes. Like, they don't see that they spend an hour or an hour and a half going through and vacuuming the coach, that they go back and check out the engine, that they empty the restrooms in the bus, and all of these things that make the trip enjoyable. I make sure that I do a news report every day about how they were out there working the night before.
Oh, and I agree completely with that, because whenever I have even the marginal drivers, I talk them up. I'm like, isn't so-and-so doing a great job? This coach is so clean. I mean, I saw him washing windows. Now I have a friend of mine who I met when I was driving in Alaska, Olin. He's my absolute favorite driver. Of course, he trained me, so he's going to be my favorite. We were doing South Carolina. He was out there washing windows. I mean, that coach was immaculate all the time. He's the epitome of professional. Now, we have some viewers. I want you guys to comment on what you see. Please, if we got some drivers out here, let us know your good or bad stories. What do you like as a tour manager? Or with your tour managers? What's a horrible tour manager story you got? What's a great tour manager story? I would love to hear something like that. I've heard some horror stories about some really bad tour managers. I'm not going to spread those because all tour managers are perfect, right, Bill?
That's right. And actually, in all this discussion, suddenly occurred to me something that I should mention, because we're talking about drivers. So I was trying to think of a situation with a driver where Matt, where he mentions the cleaning the windows and this and that, or you were saying how you like to build them up even if they're mediocre. I always tell the group that the drivers do a lot for them. They get them there safely, get them there on time, et cetera, et cetera. And the one thing that didn't occur to me when we were looking for a horror story is I was thinking back to probably my biggest aggravation I had was not with the driver themselves, but it was with the bus company, because the bus company wasn't really supportive enough. Long story short, the bus broke down. The bus company, I needed the bus immediately to fulfill the itinerary as I had it for that day. That wasn't going to happen, but I changed the itinerary around and basically said I need the bus in about 4 hours, kind of like your story. Well, 3 hours later, I find out, well, the bus is still sitting there, and the company has not sent the repair person out there. They didn't want to swap the bus out without checking it out first. And so the long story short is I didn't get the bus back until about 6 hours later. I got a replacement bus 10 minutes before I got the other bus back, because it took them all of 10 minutes to actually fix it.
Oh, man.
Right there on the site. And the driver, she was all apologetic and this and that. And you know, but her company wasn't really that supportive of what she needed and what I needed.
I have had a similar experience with that in DC, and I'm sure you're talking about DC because I know you've done a
Yes.
lot of those tours. I had, this is 2 years in a row, same bus company, not mentioning them. The first year, they, something like with the air suspension blew out, which killed out all of the air compression of the coach, I guess, which set off the emergency brake, and the bus wasn't moving anywhere. It was in the middle of the street, and it wouldn't move. The police were like, "You got to move," and the driver's like, "I would love to, but I physically can't move it." And that company just they didn't maintain their vehicles well enough.
Right.
During peak season, you can't have coaches breaking down. And the next year, same bus company, same trip, 2 buses at one time broke down.
But you're absolutely right. The coach company oftentimes is the key there. I know that if I'm working with Lakeshore out in Utah, or if I'm working with, I'm just trying to think a couple of the other ones out there that are just so terrific, that I know that they, from the top down, are all about excellence and an excellent experience. And they know they've always got an extra bus that they can get out to you if they need to, or a line of other good companies that they can get a bus to you if you're broken down. And their drivers are all schooled in not only how to drive smoothly and carefully, but also how to interact with a tour director and how to interact with the guests. And you're absolutely right. There's certain bus lines, coach lines that you can see them coming down the road, and you know whether you're going to have a good experience or not.
Yes, I with the last two, and speaking of good drivers, bad drivers, the last, well, several runs I've had, the last 2 people, I asked them my first question, how well do you, or when was the last time you were in Chicago, how well do you know Chicago? You know what they said? They both said the same thing, it's been a while. And I'm like, thank you for telling me that, I'll help you out. When you have the driver and the coach company and everybody, like you said, with the different coach companies, if you're going to get a good coach, but you don't always know if you're going to get a good driver, because those bad drivers I've had good drivers, lots of good luck with that coach company, and lots of good equipment with that coach company. I think it was basically they needed to hire 2 people. They grabbed them off the street that had CDLs and they could drive a coach, but they couldn't do it they weren't the professionals. So yeah, I mean the equipment's important. The dispatchers are important. It's everything can be so important on a coach tour. It can make or break a tour. I had a driver who I try not to use, but I did actually use him one other time, and we had a better experience the second time. Now, he was a very sarcastic person, and one of his sarcastic remarks, at least I think it was sarcastic, didn't come off as much, and it came off as a blame game to me. And he blamed me for something. It was my fault, and I think he tried to play it off, but his tone of voice really, it didn't work, and it was a very awkward 20 minutes in the coach, which you never want to have an awkward second in the coach. It was an eternity for me. And again, we've got about 7 people watching right now. You can use Twitter, hashtag TNR Live, to leave a comment. I'm watching that. And if you want to leave a comment on YouTube, please do. We would love to hear your stories about good drivers, bad drivers, good tour managers, bad tour managers. I mean, we're tour managers. We do our best to be good for everybody, but we have our bad days, and there are some people that aren't the best tour managers. And if you are watching on the Google Plus Hangout, I think Matt is monitoring those comments as best as he can. But we would love to hear anything you got to say. What do you got, Bill? Anything?
Well, I'm just thinking about drivers. I mean, the subject's have been about drivers, and I had one. This was last year, where she was from Boston or from that area, and she knew Boston very well. She hated doing New York, and had only done it like once or twice. New York. I am licensed to do New York, and I'm getting better and better. But at the time, it wasn't something I knew a lot of. But she said, Bill, she said, I will do, because she was given the choice whether or not to do a particular tour, and she said, I will do it if you're doing it. And so we actually worked together, and it turned out really well. And the reason I'm bringing up that story is because if you have people on this team where you know your strengths and weaknesses and you can work well with each other, you can really do a good job with them. I mean, an example with this particular driver was I was in Cape Cod with this driver as well, and the company I was with actually needed me to leave my group a couple hours early because they needed me to fly into Boston to pick up another group. So my driver actually dropped me at the airport in Hyannis, and she got them to the hotel, she got them checked in, she counted the luggage, she took care of them, and just so you know, I was going to see these people again 4 days later, or a week later. So this was one of those split type tours. And when I got back with them, they all raved about how good a job she did getting, taking care of them. And of course, she got me to the airport on time, and I got to my other group on time. But that's the type of driver you want, is that somebody that's willing to do the little things, just like I'm willing to do the little things that'll help them out. I'll bring them lunch, I'll get them dinner, that kind of thing if they want it. And you do what you can to make it a good team effort.
Well, absolutely, and you're completely right. And thank you for chatting that long because I was reading comments. I appreciate that. We're getting comments, yay! Phantom, my buddy Phantom. No, Phantom is actually a guy named Jonathan, and he's watched every single one of our live streams. So I want to have a shout out to Phantom, and I kind of watch his videos a little bit. It's nothing to do with traveling, and it's a little bit a lot to do with anime. So if you're into anime, you want to check his stuff out. But Lisa Shoemaker is also a tour manager. I had talked to her. She's done some educational tours traveling and down in New Orleans recently and had a really decent experience from the sounds of it. But she says she's had good drivers mostly, but often I've had drivers that didn't do homework about mapping the routes. And she loves that we can use GPS on the phone, which that has saved me a few times. And then we got Ron Brown. Is it Ron or Ronnie? Listening at the Three Folks Ron B here in Florida. Orlando. Oh, he's down in Orlando. Let's go there, guys. It's warm. He's been on since about 7 o'clock Eastern time. So a shout out to those guys. Do you know these guys, Matt?
Maybe. What I did was I also sent out an invitation, a general invitation to all my friends. So I hope that a few of them are checking in here. That's always fun.
Matt, you have friends?
No, yeah, I actually I pay a number of people to hang out with me.
That's good. Now, you'll have to get me on that list because you don't pay me. What's wrong with this?
You got to earn it, baby.
Oh, so...
And I picked up another interesting piece of news, which is actually for all the tour directors out there listening in, is real good news for us. The National Travel and Tourism Office has said that last year international tourism brought $181 billion into the U.S. economy, about 9% increase over what it was the year before. 9% increase in the amount of money we're making from foreign guests coming to the U.S. and about 139, almost 140 billion of that is just food, lodging, recreation, local transportation. And then the other 41, 42 billion is the fares that were received by the U.S. carriers, the airlines that brought the people in here. And that, just the airline increase is 5% over the previous year too. So, if anybody's out there wondering whether the tourism economy is healthy, it's very healthy.
191 billion? Is that what you said?
Total was 181 billion.
181. Okay, my dyslexia in my head must have been taken over. That's good money. I want to know where my cut is.
You gotta work.
I think the problem is I think Bill's taking the cut.
20%, right?
Oh man, if you're getting 20%, I'm coming to live with you.
Well, I put out the bill. I just haven't seen it yet.
But I think, again, speaking to the people out there that may be tour directors, we oftentimes worry whether uh, the the tourism economy has recovered from the big blow that it took in 2008, and it's a resounding yes. I think we saw it for those of us that were at the travel seminar last year. Sorry, in January, that there were a lot of companies there that were looking to hire new people, and so it's good news for us.
And I'm trying to think, and I just talked to our friend Kathy today, like 2 hours, 3 hours ago, and I hope she's on there now. I can't think of the name of the company she was telling me about, but it's an Australian-based company who last year just started running tours in the U.S. for Australians, New Zealanders, and British doing tours, coming into the U.S. and doing tours, and I can't for the life of me remember the name. I'm hoping she'll pop up and tell me. But they're doing a lot more tours this year. Last year was just kind of a feeler to tester to see if it goes, and they're running 34 tours this year in 2014. So yeah, definitely it's going up for incoming people traveling, which I am extremely excited about because her tours, she said the shortest tour she's doing is 16 days, and they actually have a 44-day tour.
Wow.
Yeah, they're doing like they come into New York, they do New York and the East Coast for half of that, and then they fly out west and do the West Coast for the other half. Can you imagine being with a group for 44 days?
I can say though that of some of the joys I've had out there working on the road, working with inbound groups, particularly the British groups, the German groups, the Australians and Irish in particular, are just a joy to work with. They're people that come and see America with new eyes, and particularly when it's an English-speaking group, it's a little easier to work with them, and they get your jokes a little bit better. I have yet to master telling jokes in German.
Work harder.
Yeah, I got to work harder, exactly. But my inbound groups are some of the real fun that I have. And sadly, this is one year that I've just not had time to work with any inbound groups.
Oh, that does suck. Bill, have you done any international incoming inbound?
I have. I've done a couple of them. I did a tour where it was. We had, let's see, there were some people from Denmark, Australia, Belgium, Australia. I mentioned that. So only a couple of them, but I really enjoyed having the experience of what Matt's talking about. I'd love to have a lot more. They do tend to see the United States in different eyes, and it's fun to talk to them about how they perceive the United States and how they see the things we're going to show them. Honestly, that 44-day tour sounds totally intriguing to me.
It does sound intriguing, and I have, I've told you guys about this. I've got this 21-day tour with my Australian quilting ladies that I did part of it last year. The funniest thing, I love it about the Australian women. We'll be driving down the road, in the rural America, and they'll see a squirrel, and they don't have squirrels, so they're going squirrel, and I'm just like, all I see is that movie. I can't. What is the movie? Where it's the dog going the squirrel, Every time I just bust up laughing, I die because they're exactly like the ADD dog.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean about the squirrels, though, because I remember that about the group I had was they were all crowding around squirrels and taking pictures of them.
I think the movie you're thinking of was Up, where there's the old guy in the house with the balloons and so forth, and there's the dog that can speak or whatever.
Yeah, he's got a little voice box around his collar. Yeah, that's definitely the movie. Okay, I don't know. Do you guys have anything more to talk about? Because we could we could close this up right now unless we got some good comments coming in. We've got nothing coming in. I'm gonna cry.
Let's not cry, Brad.
Okay, fine. I won't cry then. No, I was just wondering if there's any more comments. We'll let them kind of stream here for a moment. If you do have a comment, it's all on YouTube. You can get on YouTube and leave a comment there. And we can also do Twitter, hashtag TNR Live. Couple things I do want to mention that don't really have to do with drivers or, well, it does have to do with travel, is that I've got the TNR Live, the Travel News Report Live, in order to help support it because it's really difficult. Like getting these two guys together, even Bill is like stressed because he's got a ton of things to do the minute he hangs up, and I'm going to make him stay on for another 4 hours. But but it does take a lot of effort and everything for me to put everything together. And if we can find anybody to help support the TNR Live, that would be fantastic. There's a link in the description on the YouTube channel below that's patreon.com/letsgoroadtrippin. If you want to support anything like as little as $2 a month, that would really help out. A cup of coffee a month. Anybody want to help support that? That'd be great. Another thing I'm doing is I've got a New York City tour going on, and it's going June 18th to the 22nd. And starting tomorrow, I am going to have a competition to help you win money off of that tour, so you can get some money off on the tour and go on the tour. It's going to be a fantastic tour. Maybe I'll do a live stream just on that tour if there's enough interest. To explain what's going on with it. Do you guys have anything coming up that you'd like to talk about?
Not really, but there is an interesting article that, I'm the news guy here, but there was an interesting article that I ran across this week from the Telegraph in the UK. And they're offering tours there for people to come to the U.S. and go storm chasing.
Oh.
That really struck me as, do you want to get involved with that kind of liability? Is that really a safe thing to be offering to people? It really struck me as odd. And apparently it's a very big business, but I'm picturing the headline that, a minibus full of British tourists were flying through Oklahoma and not with a plane.
I totally follow you on that. But it is a big thing. My son would love to go on one of those tours, and he's in Nebraska, and he's in the middle of Tornado Alley practically. Really quick, Lisa wants to know, Bill, if Kim is watching, and I think I know the answer. She's in the other room. Ron, Matt, he is just an experienced passenger hauler and enjoying the good folks. And Lisa, they have not convinced me to take up quilting because the whole point of it is that I don't know anything about quilting, and they get to explain that, and I get to explain the U.S. But no, they haven't got me to take up quilting. But I've learned a lot.
Brad, talking about quilting, my mother and my sister, they live out in Tacoma, Washington. And every year they do on something called a quilt shop hop. And they go around to various quilting stores in the Pacific Northwest and pick up parts to quilts that they then put together as one major, large quilt. But it's something they do every year. I don't know where if your group ends up out in that area, but I do know that there's actually quite a lot of, I'm going to say ladies, there's probably some men as well that enjoy quilting, and those are the kind of things they love. I also wanted to mention, because you were talking about the news, and I did mean to say something about the news before we end this thing, and it was kind of, I was reflecting on the whole thing that's going on in the Ukraine, and it has more to do with the fact that itineraries can change willy-nilly, and it's not just the Ukraine where all of a sudden your itinerary may have been going there. I overheard some people on airport where they said they were no longer going there because of that. But then you also have the weather that can cause your itinerary to change. You can have bus breakdowns that can cause your itinerary to change. And, we were talking about good bus drivers. All these things all kind of lend themselves to you have to be able to think fast on your feet and kind of come up with new ideas. But talking about storm chasing, that would be that kind of thing where you have to say, oh, well, we thought we were going here, now we're going to go there. And
Oh yeah, you're right. Because if you've ever watched the Storm Chasers on Weather Channel, it's like, well, here's where the storm is. We're going that way. So I would that itinerary has to be like just
Yeah,
we're gonna go to the Midwest and see what happens. Really, is kind of what it's got to be. I mean,
I know,
I
and I can just see them getting there, and there are no storms the week they're in town.
oh yeah, that could happen too. It's like but that's got to be part of the deal. Now, really quick, Mike R sent a comment here, Bill, to you. He says he's been enjoying the conversation. He wants to know how often we do this, and basically, Mike, I do this as often as my schedule allows, and Bill and Matt are relative regular people on here. And Mike, since you met Bill at the ITMI symposium, I'm assuming you're a tour manager or a tour operator, and you could be on this show too. So hey, we should talk. So Mike R, he says basically he heard about it from you, Bill, and he's kind of a little shout out.
And really, Brad's desperate for guests. Look at who he's got this time.
Extremely desperate.
So,
Actually,
Brad,
go ahead.
Brad, well, you mentioned that Lisa was asking where Kimberly was. Kimberly, for those of you that don't know, she's my girlfriend, and she's also in the tour business. And she's leaving for DC tonight. So she's got a lot of stuff she's trying to take care of right now. So she went to she excused herself to the other room. And then the reason I'm rushing with my hair pulling out is because I'm leaving for DC tomorrow, and I don't plan to be back home until the end of June. So I'm trying to make sure that I have all my ducks in a row. That's why I'm pulling my hair out.
Yeah,
And
well,
I was
notice my hair right now.
You've already done it.
I was feeling bad for myself. I'm getting ready to head off to Europe, and I was thinking, well, I'm going to leave on 2 weeks from now, and I won't get back until May 23rd. But man, that's nothing compared to you, Bill.
Yeah.
Bill's doing a marathon run. I tell you, he's running the marathon on this one. I think. How long are you going to be gone? Did you say 2 months?
Me?
Yeah. Bill.
I'm leaving. I was in DC last week. I came back home for 4 days, and I'm leaving tomorrow. And the earliest I'll be back here will be June 20th.
So for those of you who don't know anything about it, that's beyond a marathon run. I expect that when Bill gets home, he's going to have a couple of beers. Just saying.
Yeah, maybe.
Or
I've got them already
something.
chilling.
What?
I have them chilling right now.
They're going to be ready for him when he gets back. Okay, so this has been a really good conversation. I've enjoyed it. Thank you guys both. Is there anything you need to promote or talk about? I mean, we can do their mini promotions now. I did my promotion, so it's your turn.
Well, the only thing I would add is that for any tour directors that tune into this, you might want to check out the ITMI Alumni Rest Stop on Facebook. It's there specifically for tour directors and other people involved in the tour business. So you're welcome to do that. And boy, this has just been a real good conversation. Bill, you're an excellent guest, almost as good as me.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt, I think.
I didn't know what else to say, and then I let my mouth go. Oh, well.
That's how you get in trouble, isn't it?
So, Matt, I guess the thing is we'll just have to work together sometime and then see.
You know what, Bill? It would be a joy to work with you. There are people that I bump into at symposium and out on the road that I say to myself, I'd like to work with them. And since our hair is exactly the same shade of gray, I think we'd work well together.
I think so, too.
And you guys will never know what shade of gray my hair is. It's always going to be cut. And I am getting gray. It's funny, the two of you guys, if the three of us were on one tour together with that many people, could you imagine the party?
It would be good.
Sounds fun.
I think so. Let's say, so we need what, about 200 people to sign up for whatever the heck we decide to do, so it'd have to be a cruise.
Yeah. Or a pub crawl.
Ooh, pub crawl.
Anyway,
Oh.
gentlemen, It
Yep.
has been such a joy talking with you guys, and I hope everybody listening in had a good time as well.
Me too. So basically, I want to once again, thanks Matt and Bill. Both of you are fantastic again. I may do my own live stream a little bit later this week. I've got 10 days off. And really quick, again, if you like the channel, subscribe to the channel. If you like this video, click like. You can tell people about it. It's going to be on my channel forever, so you can watch it after the fact, after we do everything. And again, my New York City trip is scheduled up for June 18th through the 22nd. It's going to be a fantastic trip. And until next time, safe travels.